Hello, I'm Ian. Have you ever experienced a board game so grotesque and so horrifying that you were afraid to talk about it? Yeah, me neither. That's why today I'm talking about Deep Madness, a dungeon crawler where you and up to 5 of your friends will try to navigate an underwater facility while you're both being attacked by Cthulhu-style monsters and it is slowly sinking.
But first, only a small amount of people that watch my videos are subscribers, so if you like what you see, consider subscribing. It only takes a second and you can always unsubscribe later.
On the surface, Deep Madness doesn't seem all too different from other dungeon crawlers. You have heroes, you have monsters, they fight, the heroes have to complete objectives, but if one of them dies, you lose. But what you don't see while looking at the board is how the theme and the mechanics interweave so magnificently that it transforms itself from a typical run-of-the-mill dungeon crawler into a tentacle-filled mass full of horror. Out in the world, there are a number of fantastic horror games, but to me, most of these either get lost in being a bit unbalanced or have a mechanic or two that evoke the fear of horror, but the entire game doesn't scream horror like Deep Madness does. Because Deep Madness is horror through and through, from the fantastically written flavor text before and after every single mission to almost every single card having flavor text filled with theme. But on top of that, the mechanics. The mechanics force you to make decisions that maybe aren't the wisest. For example, I feel that most dungeon crawlers use monsters as nothing but mere hit points that the heroes must grind through in order to reach the objective or maybe get to the end of the map. But Deep Madness takes a slightly different approach. Yes, you can usually dispatch monsters with relative ease, but sometimes the best course of action is to run away, run around, or run through monsters in order to complete the missions. I've ended many of my games with 10 to 20 monsters physically on the board as they're slowly marching toward me to kill me while I am rushing as fast as I can to complete the mission. To me, this exemplifies the feeling of horror because they're not only hit points that must be gotten rid of, instead they're literally monsters that you probably should be avoiding. Because you see, you can spend time killing monsters, but it might not always be in your best interest because it comes with a cost. Throughout Deep Madness, like many Cthulhu-style games, you will be gaining these insanity tokens that will occasionally be placed onto your character. And then if you do decide to kill a monster, there's a chance that that monster will make you flip one of these sanity tokens over and to become a madness. And if at any point during the game you get 3 madnesses, you must draw a madness card, which let me tell you are not very fun. As I said at the beginning of this video, the underwater facility you are in is slowly taking on water. Each mission in the game gives you a completely different layout with unique missions, but some of the rooms are completely flooded. Sure, you could swim and even shoot inside these compartments, but each action you take loses you oxygen, which is tracked on these little oxygen dials. Lose enough oxygen, and you start taking damage. Lose enough damage, and obviously, you die. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite as scary as being in a flooded room surrounded by monsters preventing your escape. Another break from traditional dungeon crawlers is the way the rounds work. Traditionally, all the heroes will go, and then all the monsters will activate. Heroes and monsters take turn alternating their activations. Then, at the end of the round, the hero's turn order shifts. This alternating activation means that each round you have to evaluate when monsters are going to activate compared to each of the characters. It's a really interesting puzzle that can provide a lot of stress. And that leads to one of Deep Madness's biggest downfalls. It is technically a game for 1 to 6 players, but because of the activation row, it honestly is balanced to play with 6 characters. Now there is a way to play with only 4 instead of the full 6, but it does require a little bit of modification. So ideal player counts are divisible by 6. 1, 2, 3, and 6. That way each player has an equal number of characters. And honestly, playing a solo with 6 characters is a huge task to take on. Not undoable, but it is a bit of a task. So when I do play it solo, I play with the modified 4 hero variant. It does make it much smoother, but once again, it's a different kind of puzzle to this 6-player game. And that's Deep Madness, a board game that invokes the feeling of horror like no other. And honestly, My favorite dungeon crawler I own right now? I mean, yes, it has its flaws. Many of the mechanics and tokens can make the game a bit fiddly, to the point where sometimes you even forget to do certain things, which might end up making the game a little easier. But when you truly understand how the mechanics and how all of the mechanisms work together to invoke the theme and the horror, it really shines. So have you played it, or do you feel there's another board game that captures the feeling of horror really well? Leave your feelings in the comments below, and now go experience many board feelings.